Welcome back to This Explainer. Today, we're setting sail into what is arguably the most fiercely debated patch of ocean on the planet. But look, we aren't here to chase ghosts or, debate sea monsters. Instead, we're going to systematically tear down the legendary Bermuda Triangle myth using cold, hard, official military accident reports and some incredibly fascinating hydrodynamic physics. So buckle up, because the actual truth of what happens out there, it's honestly way wilder than the fiction. So let's jump right into the very real physical danger of this area. There are over 300, yes, 300 actual documented shipwrecks surrounding the island of Bermuda. That gives this specific region the absolute highest concentration of shipwrecks per square mile anywhere in the world. It is, without a doubt, a super treacherous place to navigate, completely ignoring any of the supernatural stuff. I mean, with that much twisted metal just sitting on the seafloor, it's kind of no wonder the area earns such a dark, creepy reputation, right? And we're not just talking about modern mishaps here. We are looking at literally 5 centuries of maritime history. Because of its notoriously shallow coral reefs and those deceptively crystal clear waters, this place has been trapping ships for generations. It's basically a maritime graveyard that spans from early 15th century explorers straight through to the 1884 Civil War paddle steamer Mary Celestia, all the way up to massive modern steel beasts like the 499-foot Spanish luxury liner Cristobal Colon. The ocean here? Yeah, it definitely doesn't care what area you're from. Now, naturally, a 500,000 square mile zone completely littered with sunken ships is going to grab our attention. This massive graveyard has sparked this whole aura of inexplicable danger, giving rise to some of the wildest myths out there. You know the ones. People have blamed literally everything: extraterrestrial abductions, the lost technology of Atlantis, space-time warps, giant magnetic anomalies, and even huge seafloor methane gas eruptions. The theories are just, well, they're as endless as they are creative. To really get how these myths take hold, we have to look at the big one, the most famous triangle mystery ever, Flight 19. Picture this, December 5th, 1945. 5 Navy bombers take off from Fort Lauderdale for what's supposed to be a totally routine daytime navigation training flight. But by 4 p.m., intercepted radio messages show the flight is completely, hopelessly lost. By 7:04 p.m., the grim reality sets in. Their fuel is gone. And to make it even more of a nightmare, a PBM-5 search plane sent to find them, it disappeared too. Just an absolute tragedy. So the legend that blew up from this claims these 5 planes and the rescue ship literally vanished into thin air under totally clear skies because of some otherworldly phenomena. But, well, when we actually look at the data, the whole myth completely falls apart. So we're going to leave the ghost stories behind for a second and look at the stark, documented reality of what actually happened out there over the Atlantic on that day. Looking right at the official naval accident cards from 1945, the real culprits are pretty obvious. Actually, get this, the flight leader had a documented history of navigational errors. So the cause wasn't a time portal, it was just poor navigation that led to running out of fuel in rapidly worsening, awful weather. And that missing search plane? Tragically, it didn't vanish into another dimension. It exploded at sea, which was actually a known mechanical risk for that exact type of aircraft, completely devoid of anything supernatural. Eventually, reality caught up with the sensationalism. Back in 1975, this researcher and former pilot named Larry Kusch finally got tired of the ghost stories. He actually went back to the original Coast Guard reports, the old weather records, and newspaper archives, and did the heavy listing of fact-checking it all. His conclusion was absolutely crystal clear. The myth just didn't match history. He called it a manufactured mystery, built on faulty logic, bad reporting, and writers just repeating each other's errors over and over. And when you cross-reference those wild stories with actual Onawea data, the whimsical folklore vanishes, replaced by deadly but supernormal environmental hazards. The extraterrestrials? Yeah, those were just violent hurricanes and tropical storms. That Atlantis technology pulling ships off course, that's literally just the incredibly fast, unpredictable Gulf Stream. And the mysterious time warps tearing holes in ships, just those super shallow, ship-breaking Caribbean reefs we talked about earlier. Honestly, nature is terrifying enough without inventing sea monsters. Okay, but what about the more, science-y sounding myths? You've probably heard of the incredibly popular theory of oceanic flatulence. It sounds funny, but the idea is terrifying. Massive methane gas bubbles erupt from the seafloor, heavily aerating the water. The theory goes that this instantly drops the water's density, turning the ocean into this bubbly foam that swallows massive cargo ships whole before anyone can even grab a radio. To figure that one out, we actually have to dive into some hardcore petroleum engineering. Enter Kevin John Wilson, who literally wrote his thesis on this exact thing. He set out to analyze the exact hydrodynamic effects of subsea blowouts and bubble plumes on floating ships. He basically asked, does violently aerated water actually sink ships, or is this just another maritime legend dressed up in fake science? So most of us, myself included, would falsely assume that adding gas to water lowers the density, right? Which mathematically must mean buoyancy drops and a massive ship sinks like a rock. Sounds totally logical. But here's the catch. Archimedes' principle only works for a calm, static, single-phase fluid in equilibrium. An exploding ocean bubble plume is literally none of those things. That standard high school physics equation, it completely falls apart when the ocean is essentially erupting from underneath you. The complex physics and math actually prove the exact opposite of the myth. When a massive gas bubble hits the bottom of a hull, it instantaneously increases the buoyant force acting on the ship. The bubbles literally push up against the hull, giving it extra lift. So the entire core concept behind the oceanic flatulence theory that the bubbly water can't hold the ship up is mathematically 100% backward. Think about it like this. A bubble plume isn't happening in an isolated test tube. It's surrounded by an infinite, heavy ocean. That ambient seawater is constantly squeezing and shoving the lighter methane gas up toward the surface at crazy speeds. Because of all this massive dynamic pressure from the surrounding ocean, gas can literally only ever have a positive lifting effect on whatever is floating directly above it. On top of that, as the gas rises, it pulls the surrounding water up with it, creating these incredibly powerful vertical currents. This upward momentum can literally mound water up to 20 feet high, right on the ocean surface. Think about that. Imagine a 20-foot geyser of heavy ocean water slamming into the bottom of a boat. It is definitely not pulling it down. It's practically trying to launch the thing into the sky. But wait, this brings up a genuinely fascinating new mystery for us to solve. If these gas plumes mathematically and physically increase the ship's buoyancy and continuously push it upward, then why have over 15 actual offshore drilling vessels tragically sunk when they hit subsea gas blowouts? Like, what is actually dragging these massive, multi-million-dollar rigs to the bottom if it's not a loss of buoyancy? The real, terrifying culprit isn't a loss of buoyancy, it's dynamic instability. The violent turbulence and insane surface currents created by the plume wildly tilt the ship back and forth. This causes seawater to rapidly flood into open hatches and exposed compartments. So the ship doesn't sink because the water can't hold it up. Actually, scratch that. It sinks because the massive amount of water pouring into the ship drastically increases its weight, dragging it straight down. It tips and fills. It doesn't just drop through foam. So with the physics completely busted, NOA gives us a pretty stark final conclusion. Statistically speaking, the Bermuda Triangle is no more dangerous than any other heavily trafficked area of the ocean. When you actually look at the sheer volume of commercial and private traffic going through there every single day, the number of accidents and disappearances is, well, totally normal. There is zero mathematical anomaly to back up the existence of a supernatural danger zone. Oh, and just to tie up one last loose end, even those spooky stories about compasses spinning out of control, they have a completely mundane scientific explanation. Back in the early 20th century, true geographic north and magnetic north perfectly aligned in this specific spot. This lack of magnetic variation caused major navigational confusion for unprepared pilots and sailors who just didn't know how to adjust for it. Which leads us right back to our main culprit, human error. The U.S. military actually offers the ultimate, sobering explanation for all this maritime tragedy. When you combine the unforgiving, wildly unpredictable forces of nature with the simple reality of human fallibility, the results are way more devastating than any sci-fi story we could dream up. A lost pilot over the open ocean at night? They don't need a sea monster or an alien tractor beam to be in a truly deadly, terrifying situation. And yet, despite all this undeniable scientific proof, the crazy complex hydrodynamics, the raw statistics, and the intense debunking that's been happening since 1975, the myth is still going strong. It still fuels massive pop culture trends, drives hundreds of millions in tourist dollars to the region for themed cruises, and inspires endless fictional stories. The legend is, quite frankly, just too lucrative to let die. So I'll leave you with this final, kind of provocative thought to chew on. What is it about human nature that makes us actively choose the thrill of a spooky, unsolved mystery over the harsh scientific truth? Why do we always prefer tales of time warps and sea monsters over the tragic, mundane reality of human error in an unforgiving ocean? Keep that in mind the next time you hear a ghost story.